Hi, this is Michael William Denny of the ThunderWizarddotcom YouTube channel. So, this is merely a test of the live streaming broadcast function. If you're online and you want to watch, great. If not, that's fine too. Again, this is just a test. If this doesn't work out, don't worry. I am going to erase it. But I'm just going to go ahead and start talking here and assume that everything is working just fine. I'm going to actually toggle between windows here just to see what's going on with YouTube. Does YouTube say that I am... let's see, I don't need that. What does YouTube say I'm doing right now? Does YouTube say that I am live? Let's see here. How do I find this out? I'm going to go, let's see, I'm going to go here. Nope, I'm going to go here to Video Manager. Live streaming, okay. I was just about ready to close this up and do something else. Live streaming, so it says that I'm live. Unmute. Live streaming, okay. So there's a delay. Got it. Okay, so I'm going to interface through the actual app, and then I'm going to see what happened here, and then I'll probably erase this. So that's all for now. I'm going to try again in a few minutes if you're online. So thanks for letting me test. Hi, this is Michael William Denny of the ThunderWizarddotcom YouTube channel. So I'm streaming live again. I'm just testing things out. I'm trying to figure out going between the software and what's happening with YouTube. So I'm seeing that just now people were online watching what I was doing. Instead of launching into a teaching, I'm going to go ahead and try this chat function here and see how this works. So there's a delay on my end, but I'm seeing here that there are people here that at least were online before. So if you are online right now with this second streaming test, go ahead and say hello. And if you have any questions, I'll take some right now just while we're testing everything out. So let me see. Now I get to listen to myself. And if you have any questions, I'll take some right now just while we're testing everything out. So let me see. Now I get to listen to myself. And if you have any questions, I'll take some right now just while we're testing everything out. Hi, Cannon. I see you there. Who else is online right now? Hi, Cannon. I see you there. Who else is online right now? Hi, Cannon. I see you there. Who else is online right now? Okay, so far, all I'm seeing is Canon is online. Yeah, you did hear an echo, Canon. That's because I'm getting used to this, and I have the option to watch myself in a delayed mode. So what ends up happening is that, when I speak, I stop and I listen, and then it echoes back, and so you hear it as an echo. Hi, Lori. Hi, Mary. That's great. You don't have to speak. That's fine. Going and typing in is actually best for me because at this point I'm just trying to get used to the software and how everything works. So very interesting. Okay, so if any of you have a question, I'm going to check this part out. Hopefully this will be something we can use later on. If you have a question, go ahead and type it in. And I'm going to go ahead and launch into a subject. Hi, Toby. I see you there. Wow, this is all a little bit frightening, even for the Thunder Wizard. Lori Smalley. Oh, you already said hi. Hi, Lori. Andrew Nelson. Hi, Andrew. Okay, so Mary Hill, I see that you're online. You know, I received from you actually a question about Loki and Heimdall. And I thought that was a really interesting question. So I want to follow that up. But before I do, would you go ahead and type a little more clearly your question about the connection between Loki and Heimdall? So my apologies for the wait here. I'm waiting for the delay. I'm waiting to see what the questions are. I'll smooth all this stuff out as time goes on. So you guys are my guinea pigs. You're helping me figure out how all this stuff works. So right now, just waiting for Mary, if she wants to type in her question about Loki and Heimdall, and I'll go ahead and answer that to the best of my ability. So wait a little bit longer, see what comes up here. Okay. Okay, well, why don't I just go ahead? I don't want to burn up too much time here. I see some questions are coming in. Go ahead. If you have questions, go ahead and type them in. If I see something that I can respond to intelligently, I will. In the future, I'll have a clear idea of what I'm going to do now that I know how this works. But Mary Hill, you asked a question in one of the videos, and you wanted to know the connection between Heimdall and Loki. And that actually brings up a really good subject that I am going to do. Originally what my plan is, I want to do a whole hour-long live streaming event having to do with Ragnarok. So it was interesting that you asked that question because I have here in my notes Heimdall and Loki and their connection. So let me generally go into talking about what that is and where I want to focus on in that. So a question has been given to me about Ragnarok. Is Ragnarok a literal event, or is it symbolic, or what does it mean? So I tend to think of Ragnarok more as a symbolic event. I can't say whether or not it is literal. I'm going to have to think about that before I answer that more. Definitely I can't say that it's not a literal event, but I can say with strong conviction that it is a symbolic spiritual event, and Ragnarok happens in multiple ways and in many times. It happens within the body. Somebody said, which I agree with, that it happens every moment. And I think everything that has a life of its own will go through a type of a Ragnarok. Specifically, what I'm finding interesting about Ragnarok is that Ragnarok is a clash of opposites. And so we tend to look at it in terms of being positive and negative, the fight against good against evil. But as you know, if you've been following my channel, I don't see things in those terms. To me, that's a holdover of Christianity, which was definitely trying to limit things into a dualistic viewpoint. Ragnarok for me is exciting because I see the clash of opposites coming together to create a new creation. And so when we understand it like that, then for me it takes on a very exciting tone. So let me go through some of the polar opposites that come together. And on some level, what I'm seeing here is that these opposing forces of good versus evil are actually flip sides of the same coin, and they're actually two extremes of the same energy that's coming together and fusing. And of course, in the process of fusing, they annihilate each other. And that annihilation of each other creates a new reality. So as you know, the end of Ragnarok, what's going to happen is it's going to create a brand new reality, according to the myth. So let me just go through a few of the gods here. So in Ragnarok, as you know, it's a battle between the forces of Surt and the forces of Odin. And so let me go through the two aspects of all these that come together. First, let's start with Odin and Fenrir. This one is the most interesting to me because they don't destroy each other. What happens is that Fenrir swallows Odin, and then Vidar, the son of Odin, comes in and destroys Fenrir. Now you notice that Vidar doesn't save Odin. He destroys Fenrir. So let's focus on Odin and Fenrir. Odin, as you know the name, Odin is Woden. Wod, W-O-D, is an ancient Germanic word which we don't use anymore, which loosely translates as the fury of self-awareness. And so Woden, the suffix en, means consisting of, like a wooden door is made of wood. So Woden is he who consists of the fury of self-awareness. And so we talked earlier in another video about Fenrir, and I talked about how Fenrir was connected to the ego, because he's the fame wolf. I also talked about, even though Fenrir is seen as a force that will destroy Odin, and the gods are very worried about this, and this is why they tie him up, Fenrir is actually very necessary. I mean, he wouldn't be in Asgard. He wouldn't have spent time in Asgard and been raised in Asgard if he wasn't something that was necessary to the human being and Asgard in general. And so he is the fame wolf, which means that he has a strong connection to the human desire for fame, the human ego, and he bases all of his actions on, how it's going to affect him and his reputation. And in fact, when they came to him with the magic rope Gleipnir, after giving him the other, chains for him to try on that he broke through, he said, I don't see any fame in me breaking through that tiny little rope. And that's what made him realize that it was potentially a magic rope. So Fenrir has a strong connection to human aspirations, ego, and creating our fame, and we have to have this. This is something that human beings have to have in order to survive. If we don't have this kind of positive connection to our ego, then we're not going to be successful in this world. However, having said that, if we want to become like Odin, we have to be functioning completely without ego. Because one thing Odin does not have is ego. You cannot be completely wrapped up in the ecstasy of self-awareness, the fury of self-awareness, and still be operating from your ego. So in order to evolve, these two forces, which on some level I believe are the flip side of the same coin, these two forces come together. Egolessness and ego have to come together and destroy each other in order to move on. Now, what's interesting is that Vidar comes along. And if my research is accurate, the name Vidar has to do with opening. And it's interesting because, again, we talked about, the way to keep the ego in check. Gleipnir has to do with subtlety. And so that requires having an open mind. And so interestingly enough, Vidar, I believe the name has something to do with open. And that's exactly what he does. When he kills Fenrir, what he does is he puts his foot down and he grabs the top of his mouth, and he, opens his mouth and does some horrible thing, cracks his head open. So it's actually creating a space there, openness. So Vidar is really the higher vibration of Odin, where Odin moves to an even greater awareness of openness. So this is very valuable when we look at Ragnarok within ourselves. And this is why it's so important for us, again, going back to if you've been watching the Ascension videos, and I'm talking about the first step in the Ascension, which is the first step in the first phase of Ascension is that we have to become aware that we are in fact trapped and enslaved by our own unconscious drives, our own unconscious negative, what I call, the storyline that we have, the narrative. We're a slave to that unless we become conscious of it. When we become conscious of it, then we can change that narrative. But until that time, we are slaves to it. And the majority of people are slaves to their narrative. So in order to get past the first phase, that's the first thing we have to do. So myths like Ragnarok are really helpful because we can see this in ourselves. We can see how these negative aspects are actually part of us. But as long as we see it as something out there and something evil and something bad and that's wrong and Fenrir is this horrible evil thing and we don't identify with it, then we can never get past that first phase of Ascension. So the next deities I'm going to talk about are Thor and Jormungandr. In Ragnarok, Thor and Jormungandr attack each other and destroy each other. And so what is it about these two that show us that there is a flip side, and that they're flip side of the same coin? Thor, as we know, is a god of evolution. Thor is a god who destroys negative limitations. And this has a direct connection to Indra, and as you know in previous videos we talk about Indra and Thor are the same deity, one in the Vedic tradition and one in the Germanic tradition. And in fact, the name Indra is broken down as In-thu-ra. The, what do you call that? The seed sound thu is where we get Thunar. In-thu-ra means Lord of the full moon. Thunar means Lord of the moon. So we're talking about the same deity in different cultures, different Indo-European cultures that are separated by long periods of time. So in this we see Jormungandr and Thor. Thor is destroying negative limitation, and Jormungandr is all about limitation. So Jormungandr encircles the earth, meaning that he creates limitation in three-dimensional reality. And so Thor is always fighting against that. And Thor, as a god of evolution and a god of mental evolution, is constantly fighting against any limitation both in the physical realm and also in the mental and the spiritual realm. So in order for this universe to evolve, or for the human being to evolve, the force of evolution that breaks down barriers has to go up against Jormungandr, the force of limitation. And so as they come together, they destroy each other. I could go on, talk about Tyr and Garm and Frey and Surt, Heimdall and Loki. That was originally one of them. Let me talk about that because somebody asked about that. Heimdall and Loki, you would think that these two have absolutely no connection whatsoever. But if I'm following the same logic of thought here, then I have to come to the conclusion that Heimdall and Loki are flip sides of the same coin. They both have to do with evolution. Now this is, for me, I have a strong connection with Heimdall connected to the crown chakra. And I take that not only because of who he is and his function in Asgard, but also because of the language. His name Ham, the root H-A-M, Ham, is the root of his name. And interestingly enough, Ham is in the Vedic tradition is the sound for the crown chakra. It's the sound for the highest ether. So when somebody chants Hang, H-A-N-G, they're actually focusing on the crown chakra and opening it up. So that means that Heimdall has a strong connection to the highest evolution, spiritual evolution, which if he's residing up here in the crown chakra, then that means he is the gatekeeper to the soul exiting the body, the soul evolving to the next level. So he has a strong connection in not only keeping our awareness up, but also keeping our body intact, keeping us in our body. So he's a gatekeeper. He keeps us in our body, but he also allows us to go up into the into the crown chakra, and achieve some, some higher awareness there. Now, as you know, Loki in my teaching is a god of evolution as well. But what Loki does is that Loki uses our negativity, uses our challenges, and his job is always to needle us and poke us in the areas where we have challenges that are preventing our evolution. Loki and Thor have a strong connection. What does Thor do? Thor fights against the giants. What are giants? Giants are the forces of limitation, of ignorance, of stagnation. So that means Thor and Loki have similar connections. Loki does it completely differently. Thor is a very safe deity to deal with when you want to overcome limitations. He can be very challenging, but he's also very empowering. Loki, on the other side of what we're talking about, Loki is a challenging deity to work with. I share this in some of my podcasts and a couple of my books. I'll share it again because it perfectly describes how Loki works. Years ago, when I was living in Idaho, I did know somebody who was very deep into the Asatru community there, and she was telling me that the Asatru community she was with, it was against the rules to say Loki's name, sort of like the devil. That if you said Loki's name, you would, he would do something horrible, and they still saw Loki as sort of like a devil figure, somebody that was evil. And she shared an experience where they were at an event in a park, and they were gathered around in a circle, and one of them said, "Oh, what the heck, I'm just going to do it," and yelled, "Loki!" And according to her, out of the bushes ran a skunk, and the skunk went into the middle of the circle and sprayed everybody and left. And they took that as a sign that, you can't speak Loki's name because he is destructive, he's evil and the devil. And I looked at it and I thought, well, I mean, he wasn't a snake. If a snake came out and bit somebody and somebody died, then you would say, listen, this is an evil being. But, all he did was just make you guys smell bad and made you uncomfortable. So that to me is how Loki works. As long as you see yourself or your problems, or even he himself, if you see Loki himself as being evil, he is going to play with that, and he is going to he's going to make you confront your limitations in that area. So back to Loki and Heimdall. Loki and Heimdall are beings that are connected to higher awareness. Heimdall is, again, if we're talking about the good force, the light force, the positive force, he wants to keep us connected in our body, and he wants to help us go through life in a way that we would experience as empowering, perhaps even pleasant. Loki, on the other hand, is going to want to give us awareness and evolution in ways that we are most likely going to experience as challenging. But the challenge that we are experiencing is nothing more than us coming up against our own limitations, our own illusions about ourselves. Now, in terms of Ragnarok, Loki and Heimdall fight it out to the death, and they destroy each other. And that means that on an individual level, when we achieve liberation, enlightenment, we die, leave the body, whatever it is, these two forces have to come together and destroy ourselves. Otherwise, we will stay in the body. Otherwise, we will stay in this level of awareness. If we're talking about a universal destruction, then these two forces have to come together in order for the present reality to be destroyed, so that the new higher reality can come into being. So anyway, I got kind of launched off in that. I'm seeing that there are 12 people watching and listening. I have not been looking at your questions. Let me see. Mary Hill puts another name, Ug. Interesting that Ug is very significant here. Ug comes from the um, Indo-European word for frightening, horrifying. It's where we get our word ugly from. Now the word ugly means unappealing to look at. But originally, uglice meant something that filled the person with fright. This is also a name for Shiva in the Vedic tradition. And as you know, I believe that Shiva and Odin have a strong correlation with each other. They share the same name because the name for Shiva in the Vedic tradition is Ugra. And it's also it's also a name that is given to many gods. If you put it in front of a name, it means horrifying or terrifying or frightening. Ugra Tara is another example. So this again has to do with, for those of us who experience Odin in his purest form, it is going to be absolutely terrifying. Because in order, as I said, in order to experience Odin in his pure state, it means that you have to let go of your attachments and your ego. And that in itself is going to feel like a death. Incredibly frightening. So that's why he is furious to those who experience him. From Odin's perspective, he's not feeling fury the way we would in a human level, like I'm angry, I want to destroy you. His fury is complete, total absorption and commitment to spiritual evolution and awareness. So anyway, I'll look through some more about that. Loki's a great revealer. I think this is a great idea. Yes, he sacrificed himself for himself. Again, Odin, I agree. Thoughts on modern adaptive blank rune? Toby, you know, listen, I'm not going to tell people what to do. I don't think it's originally part of the, the runes, the 24 runes, the 3/8. For those that are interested, I have 3 books on rune shamanism, and I talk very clearly about what those are, and I don't mention the blank rune, not because of any prejudice against it. It just, 3 sets of 8 work really well, and each one of the 8 runes for me also corresponds with one of the 8 external worlds. So the 9th rune could be in the center. The thing about the runes is that the runes are very adaptable. So, if somebody comes to the runes with, in my experience anyway, with respect and honor, and they want to use a blank rune, I think that you can find some value in it. I don't use it because I don't feel a need to. I don't think it was part of the original rune system. That's why I don't teach it, and I don't think it was. I don't think it's necessarily something that people have to do. But I'm not one of those people that says it's evil and wrong. I mean, if you want to use it, use it. Experiment with it. That's the thing about the runes, is, in my experience, is that even though there are laws about how energy works, the runes are all about connecting with your higher self and with your guides, with your ancestors. So if your ancestors want to work with you that way, work with it. There's all kinds of latitude in there. Let's see, what else? Yes, that's right. Loki and Thor both have a connection to lightning and thunder. If I were to ascribe one to each, Loki would be lightning and Thor would be thunder. Thor is the thunder god. And right, if I understand it, one of the translations for Loki is wildfire, directly connected to lightning. So that was a great understanding. Thank you for that. Well, Mary, if your experience of Odin is that he has an ego, that's probably a much deeper subject. If you were to talk about that, it would probably be very enlightening. I may be using the word ego in a very specific way, but I can tell you that he doesn't have a limiting ego in the sense that we do. I'm a human being, and I'm running into this, as I'm putting myself out there, especially with this channel, people step on my toes and hurt my feelings, and my ego gets bent out of shape, and I lose my temper and all that. That's my human limiting ego. Odin doesn't have that. Odin is not limited by that. That's the sacrificing himself to his self was one way for him to relieve himself of the limitations of, if you want to call it, lack of a better word, negative ego. But in terms of having a sense of self, Yes, he has a very strong sense of self. I would completely agree with that. So again, if we're talking about, Odin and Fenrir being opposites of the same coin, if Fenrir is ego, the limiting aspect of ego that needs to be bound up, then Odin would be the positive aspect of the ego that is freed from from Fenrir. But it's interesting still, Odin still has a weakness, because if he didn't, Fenrir wouldn't be able to swallow him. So you're right. You may be right about that. That he has an ego. So that's a good point. I appreciate you pointing that out. Do I associate the 5 elements with the runes? For me, the runes in general have a fiery nature to them. Of course, you've got some obvious ones like Laguz, which is connected to water in the ocean. But even then, there's a fiery aspect to it. I don't want to say no, because if I looked at that, I could probably find some associations with it. I've got, in my teaching, I've got the 5 elements connected with the 4 cardinal directions in the center. And I do, in the book Advanced Rune Shamanism, I do assign runes to each of the 8 directions. And so you can definitely associate them with elements there. I haven't really, officially gone and ascribed that. So that's a good question. I can't answer that definitively. My suggestion is, if you want to see how I would do it, I would get the book Advanced Rune Shamanism and take a look at the, where I've put the runes in the map of the 8 worlds and the 8 directions, and what element would be associated with that. So north is water, south is fire, east is ether, and west is air or wind, and center would be earth. So again, all kinds of things that you could look into. All right, so anyway, I think I've gone through a lot of questions. There are some questions in here that I don't have answers to. Let's see, some questions, some general questions. Somebody asked me, do I practice Seidr? I can't say that I do technically, although I have obviously channeled and I work directly with the gods. I do, out of personal experience, I do tend to find that women are better at Seidr than men. And I have at least one apprentice who is a natural Seidr, where the spirit will come over her and she'll speak in another language and she won't even know what she's saying. She'll feel the power coming through her, but she won't understand what's coming out of her mouth. That's true Seidr. When you're channeling a deity, and the kind of stuff that I do when I've practiced with channeling, I have a lot of control over what I'm doing, and it's more like messages come to me and I translate them. A long time ago, I don't know how many years ago it was, probably close to 20 years ago, when I was working with my African shaman teacher, and we were doing some drumming rituals, and there were people that would come to these drum circles. They weren't really drum circles, but we were playing the traditional songs, which, by the way, those traditional songs have a specific beat which calls down a specific deity. And there was people that were from Cuba that would come, and they would go into trance. They'd flop around on the floor and all that kind of stuff, which was very strange to me. I'd never seen anything like that. What they call, the orishas, being mounted by the orishas. And that's sort of a form of Seidr. And I remember when I was at one of those drum circles, and it was in between songs, and I put my drum down, and I was just feeling the power of the rituals that were going on. And I felt, I can't really say it other than a very calm, very light, gentle presence come to me and ask me, did I want to do that? There was a guy flopping around on the floor. And I didn't really understand it. That's not part of my culture. I appreciated it. And so the question was, do you want me to do that for you? And I thought about it, and I said, no, thank you. I'd prefer not to do that. And the being said, okay. There was no pressure. So again, when it comes to seethe, I think that seethe can be something, you don't completely lose control. You can shut it off whenever you want. But to answer your question, getting around to it, I do think that women have a greater capacity for seethe than men. So I can't say that I do practice it, but I'm certainly open to it, and I certainly love being around it when it's happening with me in my presence. Here's something else I found out about seethe. Uh, if we were to connect seethe, sorry, I lost my train of thought here. Anyway, I forgot what I was going to say. If it's important, it'll come back to me. So, anyway, I think I've answered a lot of questions. Left-hand path recommended reading. It depends on, this is Clover. There's all kinds of different left-handed paths. I mean, recommended reading. First thing that comes to mind is Castaneda. I've talked clearly that I think I know Castaneda was a fraud, but he writes some brilliant things which would be classified in the left-hand path. So I would start with him, because the great thing about what Castaneda teaches brilliantly is the understanding that morality is meaningless when you're operating with real esoteric paths, and that the way, as I talked about in the left-hand path video, the way to really understand what true morality is, what true impeccability is does it drain my energy? Does it make me a target? Or does it empower me? Excuse me. And does it make me stronger in my path? And that's the trap, So that would be my recommendation. So let's see, what else here? How do we pray for temporal needs? This is Renee. Hi, Renee. How do we pray for temporal needs in the Thunder Wizard path? For instance, my friend is having boyfriend trouble. What can I do to help her? So those are two different questions, Renee. You're asking, what can you do to get your needs taken care of? And then your example is, if your friend is having boyfriend trouble, what can you do to help her? Nothing. That's her problem. You can be a friend and listen to her. If she wants help and wants to know, what you would do, you can tell her. But listen, this comes down to a lot of my philosophy on life, and it has a lot to do with the Thunder Path, and as well talking about energy and we were talking about earlier, impeccability. People attract whatever they've got in their lives. If you're, by boyfriend trouble, I'm assuming that this is somebody who's coming to you. My boyfriend does, it could be something horrible. I don't know. He's abusing her. He's not meeting her needs. She's miserable in the relationship. This kind of stuff from a shamanic perspective, the question is, why are you attracting that in your life? And until she can understand that he's not the problem, that she's the problem, she's never going to grow, and there's nothing you can do to help her. That's her path. That's her orlog. And unless she wants to know how she can be stronger within herself, the best you can do is just listen and give her a shoulder to cry on. But in terms of yourself, what you can do for your own temporal needs in your life, this has to do with exactly what I'm teaching in the Ascension series. And the first step is to realize that all of the problems in our life are our own creation, based on the narrative in our unconscious mind. I'm pointing to my navel center. The narrative in our unconscious mind creates, this is what weird is. It creates the future which we walk into. And so the thing to do is to clean up that narrative. When we clean up that narrative, then what happens is, number one, a lot of the problems take care of themselves, because we're no longer creating that based on our unconscious narrative. The other aspect is that when you get to a place where you've cleaned up your lower self, where you no longer are running on those old negative narratives, then you can literally intend what you want and it manifests. And I'm learning this. In fact, I'm starting to do it without even realizing it And you know, my fiance will point it out to me, and she'll go, "You did it again," and I'll go, "What did I do?" She said, "You did it. You said this, and then it happened." You know, I just recently went through a scenario where, you know, I'm trying to get. I have a surgery date now for my hernia, and I was battling it out with insurance companies and all that, and I realized I didn't want to deal with the insurance companies because the doctors they were giving me were, you know, butchers basically. They're just the lowest level, cheapest, you know, surgeons they can find. And so I made a decision. And I remember writing an email to her, said, "I've made a decision. Here's what I'm going to do." And I knew that I had no idea where I was going to get the resources to pay for the surgery. And then within 24 hours, that had resolved itself, and I had a surgery date, and I had financing to take care of it. And she said, "You did it. You did it again." So that's just one example. You clean up your lower self, and then you don't have to pray. You know, Odin, please give me, you know. You can. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying you don't have to. You make the decision. And then because you have a concept of how to create with weird, when you understand how weird works, that weird is a weaving of reality. You can weave your future. You can do it. So anyway, I hope I answered your question there. Let's see, anything else? Okay, so people are saying goodbye. I've been on for 43 minutes now. So anyway, this has been really interesting, and I'm really enjoyed it. Let me see, we still got 13 people watching here, which is great. So that's it for now. This was a test, and it was a very exciting test. I really enjoyed it. I'm definitely going to do it again. I have to go in and play around with the software and figure out how to set things up so the things can go the way that I want. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. I need to eat. I'm really excited. It was really great to see that people were already online. All I had to do was just go online. You guys were there. And now that I've had this really positive experience with this, just testing it out, what I am going to do is I am going to set some times, and I'll find out how to let you guys know in advance, you know, when I'm going to be on, so that you can be live and continue to ask these kinds of questions. I like this chat question thing. And let's see what else. But also know that even if you can't be online, that these live streaming videos are going to be archived, and so they'll be available on my channel for you to watch. So that's it for now, my friends. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. This has been really exciting. I'm really looking forward to doing more with this channel. And again, please feel free to write in the comments of videos your experiences and your questions. If you want to contact me personally, email. If you want to email me, that I would like to reserve for people who want to work with me one-on-one. Like you want a private session with me, or you want a Vedic reading, or you want to ask questions about becoming an apprentice. If you just have general comments about the videos, try and keep those in the comments section. Not only for, you know, to help me interface well, but also so that other people can see what you've written and can either respond or start a discussion about it. That helps me know how to put together the best content for this channel. So anyway, that's it for now. And until next time, my friends, may the power of the ancestors and the gods be with you. Okay, so now how do I turn this off? Okay, bye-bye.